Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Capital P proclamation. I'm a capital P in professor. I'm a capital P in persuasion. Positive. I'm a capital P in punctuation. I'm a capital P in progression. I'm a capital P in propaganda. Proclamation news and gathering, ladies and gents. Thank you for coming in to support the show. We do live journalism as we always do. I am the prodigious prominent Professor Johnson at PNG. Shaken, not stirred. Now we'll go flux with the show and flux with the flow. So, good morning. We are sponsored by PSS Alarms. Anyone need um, security, safety around their building, their household, their offices at work? If you've got industrialisation, factories, offices, even like you got building merchants, nightclubs, restaurants, pubs. You need to make sure. So it's well worth giving PSS Alarms a call. I'm going to give you the update now. So we're proudly sponsored by PSS Alarms. Very adequate and pragmatic works carried out. All areas are covered, including central station monitoring provided. All work done according to insurance requirements. This is a friend of mine's company. He's carried out works in Harry Kane's stepmother's house in Hertfordshire in Potter's Bar. He's carried out etiquette work in Essex, such as the Casbah restaurant, and many more big businesses such as pubs, clubs, restaurants. Please call Tariq Khan on 07908, first five digits 07908, 07908 212 216 142. 07908 216 142. 07908 216 142. That's installation and maintenance of intruder alarms, fire alarms, CCTV. All works are guaranteed and certified to SSAIB standards. 24-hour call-out service. It can provide CCTV for pubs, clubs, restaurants, or new business setup. Secure your business. Mention Professor Johnson for a discount. Secure your home, secure your business. Your safety and priorities within your business are paramount. So think first, think safety. Secure your equity. There you go. That's the start of the show. We're going to move in. This is phenomenal in Essex. Theme park becoming to Essex. Oh, not Essex. Sounds like it's London. It's in the Essex Live. That's resort. Builders working on 3.5 billion theme park could live in cruise ships. Up to 5,000 construction workers could be expected on site in the peak year of construction. Thousands of construction workers set to build a 3.5 billion London resort theme park near Essex could end up living in a cruise ship across the Thames. Epic Disney-style theme park is thought to become one of the largest construction projects across Europe, creating a theme park, hotel complex and water park, to name a few. Planning applications submitted at the end of last year outlined up to 5,000 construction workers could be expected on site the peak year of their construction in 2023. They're estimated around 50% of the workforce will come from Thurrock, Dartford and Gravesham, but with a large volume of workers from far away, are looking at plans to appropriately house them. The massive theme park is set to be built over the Thames on the Swan-Scrome Peninsula in Kent, with plans for a new car park and ferry terminal to be built here in Tilbury, Essex. However, plans revealed yesterday have raised some alarm from the UK's construction union, Unite, after it was announced that workers could be accommodated in ships in Tilbury during the construction. This is something to look forward to. Imagine that in a, well, after lockdown, it's going to be 2 or 3 years' time, I should imagine, getting that built, getting that set up properly, if they start it any time in summer. They plan transported over to ships and Tilbury after workers complete their shifts. Unite has warned these plans require full consultation to ensure workers are well treated and the cruise ships don't become expensive prisons. They have encouraged London Resort to enter discussions with them to access the quality of accommodation, cost and ability for workers to freely leave the ships. Unite National Officer for Construction Jerry Swain said, on the face of it looks like an attractive option for workers. The Hinkley Point project has demonstrated how good quality accommodation for major construction projects attract highly skilled workers. However, it is essential that the cruise ships don't, in reality, become an expensive prison. He added, it is essential that those concerned in the project station, but the cost and quality of the food provided as human beings, and in order to protect their mental well-being, it is essential that they are able to freely leave the ship and visit the local community. There also needs to be guarantees about the quality of accommodation throughout that market recovers. It would be immoral to force workers into clapped-out hulks. If these concerns are not addressed, then most skilled workers will vote with their feet. They will either look for work elsewhere or become demotivated, which will greatly damage productivity, creating delay. The communication strategy of London Company Holdings, LRCH, said it could be up to 5,000 construction workers in total creating a theme park to accommodate workers. The world leading sustainable environment will require a large workforce, he explained. At its peak, it could total up to 5,000 construction workers. We have estimated that would leave 50% who live further away from the site. Local authorities identified that an already busy local accommodation market could be put under serious pressure by the influx of workers. Mr. Martin explained that their strategy has three preliminary options: rely on existing accommodation, utilise and the mission cruise ship, and or locate mobile home on site. He added the strategy discusses the various advantages and disadvantages of each option and concludes in order to cope with the big number, a combination of options will be provided of areas we work in inspectorate and in local authorities over the coming months in relation to how it would work and how we would ensure high standards are maintained and issues or problems are identified and dealt with as soon as possible. This is also included in our application. Our approach to management and monitoring includes accommodation matching service, which provides a one-stop shop that accommodation providers can list their offer on and ensure workers. The takeout of various accommodations will be enforced through the Workforce Code of Conduct. The reason for seeking alternative accommodation is to hire constrained, available and affordable rooms in Dartford, Gravesham and Fault areas. I'm just going to move on. I like to get a bit, mix up the show a little bit. There's no business like show business. Brings a different kettle of fish to come support the show. A bit of no business. Marmite's back in the build, back Marmite. So we've got Love Island's Molly Mays Haig broke rules with Instagram giveaway. Molly May Haig has fallen foul of the UK's advertising watchdog for the second time. The Love Island star has been reprimanded for running an 8,000 online prize draw that failed to follow the rules for such competition. The watchdog said she had been unable to provide evidence the winners had been randomly and fairly picked. One lawyer said it suggests that the authorities now pursuing a wider range of cases against influencers. You find it a lot of going on. I don't know if you should see it, like raffles and stuff going on the Facebook, and they do the random number changer thing on your phone. Because I've got it on mine. I was thinking about doing it, but I'm not quite sure the rules and regulations. You have to be careful what you do on social media. Until recently, a focus has been on those who simply failed to pay for the post as being ads. Miss Haig previously had a complaint upheld against her for failing to make clear one of her posts was an advert for an online clothing retailer. Fake tans. The 21-year-old rose to prominence after appearing on ITV's dating reality show Love Island 2019, when she was one of the runner-ups. She has more than 5 million followers on Instagram and a close to 1.5 million on YouTube. Last September, she ran the offending giveaway. Its prizes including tanning foam sold under her own brand. To enter, users had to like the Instagram post provided, tag a friend to help attract their attention, ensure they had subscribed to her main Instagram channel, that of her cosmetics brand, and a YouTube channel. So what? It's hard to get an influence of the YouTube or any brand. Hello there, Jerry. The original post was liked to 1.2 million times and attracted most 3 million comments. 12 people subsequently contacted the advertising standards authority, challenging whether Miss Haig had included all their entrants into the draw, give them an equal and fair chance of winning a relatively high number of complaints. Let me just say, I'm so thankful how you guys have actually come to support my show time and time again. It's absolutely phenomenal. Inconsistencies. Miss Haig subsequently told the authority she had been overwhelmed by the response. The ASA said she claimed a member of the management team and had manually selected 100 entrants at random and assigned each a number. It said added to the number of independent party had been used Google number picking tool to choose a winner. But the regulator noted that the Instagram story she had published after the competition closed stated that the winner had automatically been picked from a smaller shortlist group of 25. We were concerned that the inconsistencies, it said, adding that in any case she had failed to provide any evidence that narrowed down group had been chosen randomly. The promotion was not to administered fairly, it's included. Miss Haig did not respond to the BBC request for a comment. Do you think there's an unlawful challenge against her? She's trying to do. It's probably very innocent what she's trying to do. Doing a raffle for money prize, but obviously earning money on a spin. Otherwise, it wouldn't be worth her doing it. Trying to turn the gamble into a business. Sending a message. Ruling came a month after Watchdog acted against two other tanning brands which had used influencers. In those cases, it said that the digital photo filters should not be applied to social media ads if they exaggerate their product's effect. One observer said that ASA will be making clear that the rules concerning influencer-led promotions went beyond labelling ads as such. Targeting someone like Molly May sends a message to other influencers who may have smaller followings to remind them that they are under the same requirements as any other brand. Nick Breen from the law firm Reed Smith told the BBC, so as they do more sophisticated campaigns, beyond copying and pasting marketing from an advertiser, they need to take them even more care. We're having a short break because I'm going to fly through this. I'm going to be flying through the show. I want you to support supporters to enjoy a great show. I'm going to put a bit of news on. Thanks, guys.
I always wanted to do this.
Always wanted to do that.
Given the number of documents and complaints handling, for ease of reference when asking a question, please mention the document number, footnote reference, and whether it is in batch 1 or 2. With that, can I welcome the First Minister of Scotland, and I begin by inviting Ms Sturgeon to make the affirmation. Would you please raise your right hand, First Minister, and repeat after me? I solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Sincerely and truly declare and affirm that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, and I would now ask the First Minister to make an opening statement, please.
Thank you, Convener. The spotlight shone on historic workplace harassment in late 2017 was long overdue. It was absolutely right at that time for my government to review its processes, consider any weaknesses and gaps in them, and put in place a procedure that would allow complaints, including those of a historic nature, to be investigated. When complaints were made about Alex Salmond, it was also absolutely right that the government took them seriously and subjected them to investigation. An individual's profile, status, or connections should not result in complaints of this nature being ignored or swept under the carpet. That, in this case, it was a former First Minister, does not change that. The procedure that was adopted in late 2017 in the wake of the Me Too concerns was drafted by civil servants, largely independently of me. However, I was kept abreast of its development and I did sign it off. As a result of a mistake that was made, a very serious mistake in the investigation of the complaints against Alex Salmond, 2 women were failed and taxpayers' money was lost. I deeply regret that. Although I was not aware of the error at the time, I am the head of the Scottish Government, and so I want to take this opportunity to say sorry to the 2 women involved and to the wider public. I also accept without any reservation that my actions deserve to be scrutinised. 2 years ago, I volunteered for such scrutiny by referring matters relating to my contact with Alex Salmond to the independent advisor on the Ministerial Code, James Hamilton. Mr Hamilton is conducting an independent investigation and I await his findings. His investigation is not being conducted in public, though of course his conclusions will be published. As a result of that, he is able to hear and consider material that, because of a contempt of court order, this committee cannot, including, as I understand it, from people who were actually party to discussions that others who were not party to those discussions are seeking to attest to. Mr Hamilton has offered no commentary on his investigation, and nor will I. However, this committee and the public are entitled to hear from me directly on the matters under consideration. So today I will do my best to answer every question asked of me directly and in as much detail as I can. Firstly, on the 8th of January 2019, I volunteered to Parliament my contact with Alex Salmond. I stated as follows. On 2nd April 2018, he informed me about the complaints against him. I will explain why I stand by that statement. Second, I will set out why I did not immediately record the April 2nd meeting within the Scottish Government, a decision based entirely on my desire to protect the independence and the confidentiality of the process. Thirdly, I will outline why I believe it was right that I did not intervene in the investigation when I became aware of it, even though Alex Salmond asked me to do so. And finally, although the mistake made in the conduct of the investigation may not be defended, I will demonstrate that the decisions taken at each detail. However, I want to focus in these opening remarks on the issues around my contact with Alex Salmond on 2nd April and my contact 3 days earlier. As claimed in his testimony to the committee that the meeting in my home on the 2nd of April took place with a shared understanding on the part of all the participants of the issues for discussion. In other words, that he turned up to the meeting believing I already knew everything. I think it's worth noting, even just in passing, that this in fact represents a change in his position. On the 14th of January 2019, after the conclusion of the judicial review, a spokesperson issued this comment on his behalf. Alec has no certainty as to the state of knowledge of the First Minister before then, by which he meant the 2nd of April. A brief account of what happened on the 2nd of April suggests, as per his comment in January 2019, that he did not assume full knowledge on my part in advance. When he arrived at my house, he was insistent that he speak to me entirely privately, away from his former Chief of Staff, Jeff Aberdeen, and Duncan Hamilton, who had accompanied him, and my Chief of Staff, who was with me. That would have seemed unnecessary had there already been a shared understanding on the part of all of us. He then asked me to read a letter he had received from the Permanent Secretary. This letter set out the fact that complaints of sexual harassment had been made against him by 2 individuals. It made clear that these complaints were being investigated under the procedure adopted at the end of 2017, and it set out the details of what he was alleged to have done. Reading this letter is a moment in my life that I will never forget. And although he denied the allegations, he gave me his account of one of the incidents complained of, which he said he had apologised for at the time. What he described constituted, in my view, deeply inappropriate behaviour on his part, perhaps another reason why that moment is embedded so strongly in my mind. At the time he was showing me the letter and outlining his account, Jeff and Duncan were doing the same with my Chief of Staff. Again, this would seem unnecessary had she and I known everything in advance. Questions have been raised about a conversation I had 3 days earlier on 29th March 2018 with Jeff Aberdeen and another individual. I've not seen Mr Aberdeen's own account of that conversation. However, I obviously know the account Mr Salmond has given of the meeting, although he also said on Friday that he had not been given a readout of it. Let me say up front that I have no wish to question the sincerity of Jeff's recollection. Jeff Aberdeen is somebody I remain extremely fond of. But it is clear that my recollection is different and that I did not and do not attach the same significance to that discussion that he has. The purpose of the conversation seemed to be to persuade me to meet with Alec as soon as possible, which I did agree to do in that conversation. Jeff did indicate that a harassment type issue had arisen, but my recollection is that he did so in general terms. Since an approach from Sky News in November 2017, and I mentioned this in my written evidence to the committee, I had harboured a lingering suspicion that such issues in relation to Mr Salmond might rear their head. So hearing of a potential issue would not have been in itself a massive shock. What I recall most strongly about the conversation is how worried Jeff seemed to be about Alec's welfare and state of mind, which, as a friend, concerned me. He also said he thought Alec might be considering resigning his party membership. It was these factors that led me to agree to meet him, and it was these factors that placed the meeting on the 2nd of April firmly in the personal and party space. Not unreasonably at all, some people have asked how I could have forgotten the conversation on 29th March, and I certainly wish my memory of it was more vivid. But as I have stated, it was the detail of the complaints under the procedure that I was given on 2nd April that was significant and indeed shocking. That was the moment at which any suspicions I had or general awareness that there was a problem became actual and detailed knowledge. It's also worth saying that even if I had known on 29th March everything I learned on 2nd April, my actions wouldn't necessarily have been different. Given what I was told about the distress Alec was in and how it was suggested to me that he might be intending to handle matters, it is likely that I would still have agreed to meet him as a friend and as his party leader. And as I also set out in written evidence, my decision not to record the meeting on 2nd April immediately wasn't about the classification I gave it, not about it being a party rather than a government meeting. It was because I did not want to compromise the independence or the confidentiality of the process underway. All of which begs the question of why I would have gone to great lengths to conceal a conversation that had taken place a mere 3 days earlier. Let me turn now to my decision to not immediately report the contact. Sections 4.22 and 4.23 of the Ministerial Code seek to guard against undisclosed outside influence on decisions that ministers are involved in and likely to have an influence on, such as changes in policy or the awarding of contracts. This situation, as I saw it, was the opposite of that. The terms of the procedure excluded me from any investigation into a former minister, I had no role in the process and should not even have known that an investigation was underway. So in my judgment, the undue influence that Section 4 is designed to avoid would have been more likely to arise had those conducting the investigation been informed that I knew about it. I didn't want to take the risk that they might be influenced, even subconsciously, by any assumption of how I might want the matter handled. Their ability to do the job independently would be best protected by me saying nothing. It's also my reading of the code that had I reported it, the fact of my meeting with Alex Salmond would have had to be made public, potentially breaching the confidentiality of the process. It was for those reasons that I did not immediately record the 2nd April meeting or the subsequent phone call on 23rd April in which Mr Salmond wanted me to tell the Permanent Secretary that I knew about the investigation and persuade her to agree to mediation. It is worth noting that the Ministerial Code places a number of obligations on ministers, and respect for the impartiality of civil servants and the confidentiality of government business are also obligations imposed on me by the Code. My judgment on that changed when Alex Salmond made it clear to me that he was seriously considering legal action. I felt then that I had no choice but to inform the Permanent Secretary, which I did on 6 June 2018. I also confirmed to her that I had no intention of intervening in the process, and I did not intervene in the process. Mr Salmond's anger at me for this, I think, is evident, but intervening in a process that I was expressly excluded from and trying on behalf of a close associate to change the course it might take would have been an abuse of my role. The committee is also rightly interested in the judicial review, and the government has now published legal advice that informed the decisions we took. It's clear from that advice that while the government had very strong prospects of defending Mr Salmond's initial challenge, that changed over a 2-month period from late October to late December. The concerns raised by counsel, caused by emerging evidence regarding the role of the investigating officer, undoubtedly caused me and others to pause to check if we should continue to defend the case. However, as late as December the 11th, the view of law officers following consultation with counsel was as follows. Very clear that no question or need to drop the case. The Lord Advocate clear that even if prospects are not certain, it is important that our case is heard. Senior counsel made clear that his note was not intended to convey that he didn't think we have a stateable case. They concluded that, including on the appointment of the investigating officer, and again I'm quoting, we have credible arguments to make across the petition. It was when that changed that the decision was taken to concede. In any legal challenge a government faces, there is a balance of risk. That risk cannot be eliminated, but the task of ministers is to consider carefully all of the advice we receive and consider the broader public interest. And the test in the Ministerial Code is not the view of external lawyers, but of law officers. Convener, finally, and you'll be glad to hear briefly, though I hope to say more as we get into questions, I feel I must rebut the absurd suggestion that anyone acted with malice or as part of a plot against Alex Salmond. That claim is not based in any fact. What happened is this, and it is simple. A number of women made serious complaints about Alex Salmond's behaviour. The government, despite the mistake it undoubtedly made, tried to do the right thing. As First Minister, I refused to follow the age-old pattern of allowing a powerful man to use his status and connections to get what he wants. The police conducted an independent criminal investigation. The Crown Office, as it does in prosecutions every single day of the week, considered the evidence and decided there was a case to answer. A court and a jury did their jobs, and now this committee and an independent investigation are considering what happened and why. For my part, I am, if not relishing the prospect, relieved to be finally facing this committee. But given all that has brought us to this moment, being here also makes me really sad, and in all the legitimate consideration of this, sometimes the personal and human elements of this situation are lost. Alex spoke on Friday about what a nightmare the last couple of years have been for him, and I don't doubt that. I have thought often about the impact on him. He was someone I cared about for a long time. And maybe that's why on Friday I found myself searching for any sign at all that he recognised how difficult this has been for others too. First and foremost, for women who believed his behaviour towards them was inappropriate, but also for those of us who have campaigned with him, worked with with him, cared for him, and considered him a friend, and who now stand unfairly accused of plotting against him. That he was acquitted by a jury of criminal conduct is beyond question, beyond question. But I know, just from what he told me, that his behaviour was not always appropriate. And yet, across 6 hours of testimony, there was not a single word of regret, reflection, or even simple acknowledgement of that. I can only hope that in private, the reality might be different. Today, though, is about my actions. I have never claimed in this or anything else to be infallible. I have searched my soul on all of this many, many times over. It may very well be that I didn't get everything right. That's for others to judge. But in one of the most invidious political and personal situations I have ever faced, I believe I acted properly and appropriately, and that overall I made the best judgments I could. For anyone, at least anyone willing to listen with an open mind, that is what I will seek to demonstrate today.
Thank you, First Minister. And we'll now go on to questions. Our committee and therefore our report is split into various sections. It's about the development and implementation of the policy, it's about the judicial review, and of course the ministerial code. And we will attempt to chronologically go through that for ease of the session, although there will be crossovers, that's understandable. So can I ask the first question, please, about the new policy that was put in place, and ask you to give us an outline of the development process of that policy.
The genesis of the new policy was, of course, the Me Too revelations of late 2017. I don't need to go into detail for people around this table. This was something that rocked the UK, indeed rocked many parts of the world, something that began with very serious historic allegations about people in the entertainment and media business very quickly became something that gripped the political system here in the UK. There were allegations about sexual harassment, including historic sexual harassment at Westminster. And then in late October, and I'm sure everybody around this table vividly remembers this, there were allegations, I think it was mainly in the Sunday Herald at the time, about allegations of sexual harassment in this institution, and a concern that there were not proper processes in place to allow those to come forward, and that people, women, didn't have the confidence to bring complaints forward. So that is the backdrop. I wrote to the presiding officer, I believe on the Monday after that story, to suggest cross-party discussions. They took place the following day, as I recall. And the Cabinet that morning, as I believe the UK government was doing or had been doing, had a discussion about this and decided that we should review our processes. We didn't decide what the outcome of that review should be, but we decided that it was right, given the concerns that had been raised about lack of processes, or at least lack of processes that people had confidence in, that that should happen. That was a commission that was given by Cabinet to the senior civil service. The Deputy First Minister indicated that to Parliament, I believe that afternoon, I think it was, I took part in discussions in the presiding officer's room here with representatives of other parties. And I think it's fair to say at that time all parties were reviewing their processes as well. I know my party was and did. You've heard evidence, I know, from senior civil servants who were very involved in this work. They did an assessment of the gaps. There's been discussion about they had prepared early drafts of the procedure were prepared. The inclusion of former ministers, because one of the gaps that had been identified was the inability to, under our existing processes, to investigate or address historic complaints. The inclusion of former ministers was there from the outset. It hadn't been expressly requested by me or by the Cabinet. That was something that was included because it was perceived to be a gap. Through an iterative process of drafting and redrafting and changes, I think I would probably summarise 3 key policy changes that took place over that period from early November to me signing off the policy on 20th of December. Firstly, that current ministers came to be added into it. The view being, as I understand it, that it made sense to have all ministers dealt with in the same procedure. Secondly, at a later stage, I think around mid, a First Minister's role in effectively having a sort of gateway part of the process of deciding with the Permanent Secretary whether an investigation should be triggered was removed, so that that was something the Permanent Secretary could decide on her own, and a First Minister wouldn't have any role in that decision. And given this was a procedure about politicians or former politicians, I thought that was appropriate. And then finally, the change that was made towards the end of the development, closer to me signing it off, was that in the case of former ministers, a First Minister should not be told about the investigation or the outcome until the end of that process. I noted Alex saying on Friday that he couldn't understand why that was the case for former ministers and not current ministers. I have to confess to being quite astounded that a former First Minister wouldn't understand that distinction. The reason why, and to be perfectly frank, my preference would have been, given that this was about politicians or ex-politicians, for that to have been the case overall. But for current ministers, it's important that a First Minister knows of any concerns that are being raised, because you have an ongoing duty to decide whether somebody continues to be fit to hold office. So that is the reason for that distinction. That's a summary account, Convener, but I'm happy to go into any detail on any of these aspects that members wish.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that'll be the case. And I'll go first of all to Margaret Bishop.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning, First Minister. I wonder if I can take you back to when the inquiry was announced, and that was in January 2019. And you said at that point, I will answer any question to the fullest extent possible, that my government will cooperate fully with all inquiries. The inquiries will be able to request whatever material they want, and I undertake today that we will provide whatever material they request. Why didn't that happen?
Ms. Mitchell, I consider that has happened. Now, I concede at the outset that this committee has been frustrated at not being able to access certain information that it wanted to access, and I readily acknowledge that. Some of that is information and material that is not within the control or the gift of the Scottish Government, and I think I will go into that because the committee knows the different categories here. The Scottish Government has made available to this committee copious amounts of information in terms of written information, documents, written material, and of course civil servants and now me today are giving evidence orally. The main issue of difference between the government and the committee, and I recognise this and I recognise the different views that exist, is around legal advice. And there is a long-standing convention that governments do not release publicly their legal advice. And it's not a convention that is in place for no good reason. As a minister of some long-standing now, it is really important for the governance of the country and to ensure that ministers are able to base their decisions on the best advice possible, open and frank advice, that exists. Because otherwise, if you had a situation where legal advice was routinely published, lawyers may start to fashion their advice with that in mind. So it's a convention that is important, and it's not just one that the Scottish Government adheres to, it's one that many governments, as I understand, adhere to. So that has been the basis for that decision. The Lord Advocate, of course, has sat before this committee and shared very openly the decision-making process around the judicial review and the factors that were taken into account by the government at different stages of consideration. There was also an agreement, I know, that the Deputy First Minister reached with the committee about sharing some information privately, but also some information that was allowed to be shared publicly, effectively a summation of the legal advice. So we have sought to try, within the constraints of that convention, to make information available to the committee. I appreciate the committee was not satisfied with that, and that, coupled with some of the, in my view, completely unfounded allegations that have been made about the basis for decisions that people were taking, and particularly allegations that were being made around motives and factors in the consideration of the judicial review, we decided yesterday to the substantial legal advice has been released. I think the committee.
I think I lost my driving license, put it back now. And since I left, it's probably still been closed to university. You know what I mean? So I don't really say much can I? Cascas or arseholes, they go, oh, you've got mental health. How about mental health? What are you talking about? I'm physically more maintained than my ex-wife. No disrespect, but I get up, I train every day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, phone through. So, can't say much. Anyway, so I'm just going to do my rest of my journalism. I'm going to be with it. Anyway, there's no business like show business. Proclamation, you haven't said yet, so I'm on YouTube, I'm on YouTube page, that's right. Oh, I did smash my gaffer. No business like show business. Flux for the show, flux for the flow. Yes, COVID-19, Dolly Parton marks vaccination with Jolene revite. Country star Dolly Parton has been given a COVID-19 vaccine dose after urging others to follow her example by remanaging one of her hit songs. Parton 75 sang an adapted version of Jolene before receiving shots of Vanderbilt University Medical Center in Nashville, Tennessee on Tuesday. Vaccine, 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 vaccine. I'm begging of you, please don't hesitate. Parton sang in a video. She was injected with a vaccine developed by Moderna. Parton was credited with helping fund of the Moderna vaccine after donating $1 million, which is £716,000, to Vanderbilt University Medical Center. A portion of the singer's money went towards funding an early stage trial of the Moderna vaccine. Trials. The Moderna vaccine was found to offer nearly 95% protection against severe COVID-19. The Germany winning musician said she has been waiting for a while for her vaccination. I'm old enough to get it and I'm smart enough to get it. The singer told fans in a video posted from the university. I don't know if any of your family had their vaccination yet. Mum, dad had their first vaccine. I haven't yet been called up. I don't know, it might be in the next couple of months, who knows. I'm 37, so they're obviously the most vulnerable people first, which is the elderly folks. Now vaccine supply has increased. In the US, at least, Parton said she wanted to encourage everybody to get theirs. There are some small side effects of the vaccination as well. My mum and dad have been a bit poorly for the last couple of days, feeling a bit, feeling a bit fatigued, I'd say. I just want to say, all of you cowards out there, don't be such a chicken squat. Get out there and get your shot, she said. The 9 to 5 singer is the latest star to promote coronavirus vaccinations. Other celebrities who have had COVID-19 vaccine included Sir David Attenborough. I don't know if you watch David Attenborough. His life about the world, about humanities, about globalisation, industrialisation is very phenomenal. I watch these things on YouTube. I mean, I've studied arts and humanities as well, so I've got quite a good insight of global warming, global industrialisation as well, pollution, chemicals, can cause absolute pollution throughout the world. As we've had the thick black smog, things like that, that's what's killing humanities. Take care, Sugar. I'll catch you later. Other celebrities who have had COVID-19 vaccine include Sir David Attenborough. The nationalist and broadcaster 94 received COVID-19 jab in January, months after speaking of the immense suffering caused by the pandemic. Jane Fonda, the Academy Award-winning actress, 83, shared the news of the jab in an Instagram post in February, posting, "It doesn't hurt." Sir Ian McKellen, the veteran actor, 81, was vaccinated at the Queen's Mary's University Hospital in London, saying afterwards that he felt euphoric. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the former politician action hero, 73, had his jab in January in Los Angeles and nodded to one of the best known movie lines when he said, "Come with me if you want to live." Today was a good day. I've never been happier to wait in line. If you're eligible, join me and sign up to get your vaccine. Come with me if you want to live. The BBC was responsible for the content of external sites. You can view original tweet on Twitter. Bette Midler, Broadway singer and actress, 75, announced she got the Pfizer vaccine on the US talk show Jimmy Kimmel Live in February. Sir Elton John and Sir Michael Caine. The pair urged the public to get vaccinated against coronavirus in a National Health Service (NHS) advert released in February. I'm proud to join the forces with the Michael Caine to promote fantastic at NHS, the COVID vaccine programme, demonstrating how quick and easy it is to get vaccinated and why it's important. Let's all come together and do our bit in the fight against the wretched disease. You can only but thank the NHS for rolling out this vaccination in such a methodical formation and that they're doing, and the volunteers as well, giving up their time. Philanthropists. I mean, I've been a philanthropist for many years. I want to start earning some money for what I do. My produce, advertising. I work hard, hand in hand, day in, day out. Calls for SNP. Calls for Nicola Sturgeon to quit over Alex Salmond revelations. Nicola Sturgeon is facing calls to resign after new documents raise further questions about her involvement in Sir Alex Salmond's saga. The government had published emails showing it continued a doomed legal fight for Mr. Salmond despite its lawyers advising it was likely to lose. Further evidence from the two other witnesses has also called into question Miss Sturgeon's version of events. Scotland's First Minister is to face an inquiry over the affair on Wednesday. The Scottish Parliament has set up a special committee to investigate the mishandling of sexual harassment complaints against Alex Salmond. SNP heard from the former minister last week, and now it is Miss Sturgeon's turn. Scottish Conservative leader Douglas Ross said there was no longer any doubt that Nicola Sturgeon lied to the Scottish Parliament and broke the ministerial code on numerous accounts. He added, no First Minister can be allowed to mislead the Scottish people and continue in office, especially when they have tried to cover up the truth and abuse the power of their office in the process. The weight of evidence is overwhelming. Nicola Sturgeon must resign. The party, which had earlier published a dossier claiming Miss Sturgeon has breached the ministerial code of up to 38 times, said it would be submitting motion of no confidence in the First Minister of the Scottish Parliament. Labour SNP Jackie Bailey said the new document showed that the government's handling of harassment complaints against Mr. Salmond had been indefensible. But the pro-independent Scottish Greens, who hold the balance of power of any vote of confidence, said it was the committee and the ministerial code inquiry to do the jobs they've been tasked with. Liberal Democrats said the new documents look very serious to the First Minister, but added she deserves a day to respond to the allegations before we decide what to do next. A spokesperson for Miss Sturgeon said she would address the issue and much more beside at the Holyrood Committee on the Scottish Government's handling of harassment complaints. He added, but no call to a vote of no confidence in the middle of a pandemic before hearing a single word of the First Minister evidence is utterly responsible. Alternative reality, the First Minister has denied breaching the ministerial code, the rules setting out the government's ministers are expected to behave, and has said she is relishing the opportunity to put her side of the story forward at the inquiry. She has also dismissed Mr. Salmond's claims that the people close to her, including her husband Pete Morell, the SNP chief executive, had plotted against him as untrue. Ms. Sturgeon said there was no evidence to back up the allegation and has accused her predecessor of creating an alternative in reality. Ms. Sturgeon served as Mr. Salmond's deputy for many years before succeeding both First Minister and SNP leader in 2014. A raft of new documents published by the government on Tuesday evening, including email advice. It had been received warning that it is unlikely to lose a judicial review on its handling of the complaints against Mr. Salmond. Email showed a senior lawyer was very concerned indeed about the case in October 2018, with the government's counsel urging it to admit defeat by 6 December, but did not so on January 19th, when it had to pay Mr. Salmond legal fees of no more than $500,000 on top of its own costs, after admitting its investigation into the allegation had been unlawful. Extreme professionals' embarrassment. This was because the civil servant tasked with investigating the complaints had already been in contact with the complainants. Senior lawyer Boddy Dunlop QC said on the 31st of October that this present a very problem indeed, and it could appear that the investigating officer was not eligible. Relations with external counsel worsened after a series of problems with bringing forward the documents to the civil court. With the lawyers right on the 19th of December that they had suffered extreme professional embarrassment and that the case was becoming unsustainable. By December the 28th, the lawyers had threatened to resign from the case and the government conceded defeat days later. Mr. Salmond was later cleared of 13 charges of sexual assault against a total of 9 women after a separate criminal trial at the High Court in Edinburgh in March of last year. On top of the COVID crisis, Nicola Sturgeon now has a major political crisis to deal with as well. The Conservatives' call for resignation backed up with plans for a vote of no confidence is a major escalation of political tensions at Holyrood. If she was close to confidence vote, she would be expected to resign as First Minister. The SNP does not have a majority in the Scottish Parliament. The opposition is strong enough to vote down the government if it so chooses. However, both Labour and Liberal Democrats want to wait to hear the First Minister's evidence to the Holyrood inquiry before deciding their positions. My sense is the Greens would not try to oust the First Minister before they have seen the findings of 2 inquiries into the handling of harassment complaints. That could help sustain in her office, although the parliamentary arithmetic would still be tight. All this was just over 9 weeks to go to the Holyrood elections, where the public will give their verdict on all parties and whoever leads them. The Scottish Government had refused to publish the legal advice it had received on opposition parties' push for a vote and no confidence in Deputy First Minister John Sweeney. Mr. Sweeney said papers showed that legal advice was optimistic in the first instance, but that it became gradually but progressively less optimistic over time. And he said the government had taken the right and proper approach by conceding within a matter of days, or being told the case was no longer winnable. Meanwhile, the committee had also published submissions for Duncan Hamilton, the former SNP, MSP and lawyer for Mr. Salmond and Kevin Pringle, and former SNP Communications Director. Mr. Salmond had cited both men as backing up claims about meetings with Ms. Sturgeon, including an allegation the name of the complainants was passed by Mr. Salmond's former chief and staff in breach of confidence. Both said they agreed that this had happened, despite Ms. Sturgeon's telling SNP that, to the very best of my knowledge, I do think that's happened. Ms. Sturgeon said, has also maintained the only learned of the complaints against Mr. Salmond at a meeting at her home on the 2nd of April 2018, despite accepting she had met his former chief of staff, Jeff Arbadane, and her Holyrood office on the 29th of March. Mr. Pringle and Mr. Hammond said they had taken part in a conference call with Mr. Aberdeen in the 29th of March meeting and said he was clear that the purpose of the meeting was to discuss the 2 complaints. Mr. Hamilton was present at the meeting on the 2nd of April and said that when we arrived, everyone in the room knew exactly where they were. No introduction to the subject was needed, and no one was in any doubt that what we were there to discuss. The Former SNP also insisted that Mrs. Sturgeon had offered to assist Mr. Salmond in seeking a mediation, with the complainant saying she had told him that if it comes to it, I will intervene. However, Mr. Salmond told SNPs in January 2019 that I was always clear that I had no role in the process. I did not seek to intervene at any stage. Why did Mr. Salmond tell the inquiry? Mr. Salmond was the SNP leader for a total of 20 years and the First Minister for 7, before being succeeded in both roles of Miss Sturgeon after the independence referendum 2014. His long-awaited appearance at the inquiry last Friday saw him claim that Scotland's leadership had failed, as he called for Mr. Murrell and the country's top servant, Leslie Evans, to quit, and Scotland's top law officer, Lord Advocate James Wolfe, to consider his opposition. He alleged that there has been deliberate suppression of information inconvenient to the government throughout the saga, including part of his written evidence to the committee that was removed after a request from the Crown Office, despite having already been published by Parliament. Mr. Salmond also told the committee that had been given a memory stick in the build-up to his criminal trial that contained messages which involved pressuring police, collision of witnesses, and construction of evidence because police were felt to be inadequate in fighting it themselves. He described the messages, which are believed to have been handed over to the committee by the Crown Court on Tuesday, a probably most shocking thing I've seen in my life. You think these guys are supposed to be very etiquette with, sending messages to try and pull the wool over the police's eyes, trying to cover his case. That's very bad, thing to do as a minister, a member of Parliament, an MP. He's the face of the SNP, face of Scotland. He's breaking all litigation rules and regulations. But he said he could not give any further details because he had been told he could face prosecution if he do so. That's why they have to keep quiet. So, he could slip up and get caught out, and then he's in trouble. Drops. Leaflet drops by Lib Dems have continued despite a message from the government which says stay at home. Attenborough, the leader of Hertfordshire, CLR David Williams, expressed his annoyance at a Hatfield County councillor continuing local election campaign during the breaking for such arrogance and disregard for the rules that the Democrats group Paul Zavascki last week outlawed the lockdown by campaigning in Watford, Royston and Berkhamsted. The leader also explained that the evidence from the Cabinet Office urged political parties not to campaign during this period. I got one last year. A year before when I was in Abbey. The government view is that these restrictions do not support door-to-door campaigning or leaflet by individual political activists. Added that campaign advice will be amended by the government on the March the 8th, allowing for some activities to take place in a COVID-secure way. In the meantime, I'll be drawing CLR Zavascki's activities to the attention of police and local monitoring officer. Paul Zavascki, the Lib Dem County Councillor, did not deny these activities and claimed neither the police or monitoring officer have been in touch. He said, I refuse to play the nasty little game that Tories and Labour are conspiring in to try to damage our democracy through peddling of this fake news and a despairing attempt to ban opposition, the like of which is reminiscent of some totalitarian banana republic. If CLR Williams does as he stated, I do not hope that the police charge him with the wasted police time. The letters I see was seen delivering were all delivered after the date of his email and after the rigorous assessment outlined in the document. I was wearing PPE and made sure at all times my activities were COVID safe. Though this was a different statement in the Lib Dems told the Welling Hatfield Times a few weeks ago when leaflet drops were raised at Welling Hatfield Borough Council meeting. Leader of the Welling Lib Dems Councillor Malcolm Cohen said in mid-February the delivery that was being referred to was paid for delivery, which is clearly permitted. Had either Lib Dem bothered to ask, we would have told them. Lib Dems also directed the When Hatfield Times to the party's guidance around how its activists should respond to the question for the media around campaigning. The guidance claims that the Conservative Party is encouraging their activists to make vexatious complaints about Lib Dem activities and refers to the National Police Chiefs Council volunteer guidance. MPCC and it is reasonably necessary for the volunteer to leave home in order to achieve the outcome intended by delivery of leaflets, and if it was not possible for an outcome to be achieved from home. When Hatfield Labour leader Councillor Kieran Forbes has said Lib Dems' lack of apology of offensive. William Hatfield leader Councillor Kieran Forbes also responded to Councillor Zabowski's view that Labour is trying to undermine democracy by being against this type of campaigning. Councillor Forbes said, I wasn't surprised to hear the Conservative Council leader confirm that Liberal Democrats have been ignoring all the guidelines by continuing campaigns throughout the lockdown across Hertfordshire. I was stunned by the time when a telephone cancelling resident of my local area that this has continued right up to last weekend, even after Lib Dems were warned the matter has been passed to the police and council monitoring officers. I was stunned to be told telephone at the area this continued right through last weekend. This isn't a game. The rules are there for everyone to observe, and at the time when the public is asked to continue to follow them for the good of everyone and get out of this lockdown as soon as possible, it is simply offensive to see elected officials refuse to without any sense of apology. Herts Police, who have also been informed of Lib Dems' leaflet according to the party, has also been contacted for a response. Local elections take place on May the 6th for the borough, county and parish councillors, along with the police crime commissioners. You can wish your vote at elections in March, May the 6th. Make it a wise vote as well. Essex Live. Men's rehabilitation reported Essex Police. Lloyd of Ulswater Road, London, was arrested in the same month and convicted at Basden Crown Court in Basden, Essex on Thursday, February 18th. He had previously denied all charges he was accused of. He was convicted of 19 counts of rape and 5 counts of sexual assault. On Thursday, February court, he was sentenced to 9 years in prison and put the sex offenders registered for life. He should have life in prison. It's disgusting. Investigator Officer Police Constable Karen Small said Joe Lloyd subjected the victim to. He paid little regard for his victims, instead manipulated them for his own sexual gratification. The investigation has involved years of painstaking detective work to secure his conviction and sentencing. I want to thank the victim for their support. They have shown incredible courage, firstly to come forward and report what happened, and then to have to relive the ordeal for a jail. No sentence can reverse the past, but I hope this goes some way to help them move forward. I hope this sentence shows that it is never too late to get justice, and I would urge any other victims of sexual abuse to come forward and report this. Does he deserve a life after prison? Does he deserve to get only a short sentence in prison and not stay there for the rest of his life? He deserves to stay there for the rest of his life, because one offender always offends. That's disgusting. Picking on young kids. David Jankovic was jailed following a series of hits and run collision in Colchester last August. On August 27, 2020, 23-year-old jailed failed to give way at a junction at Avonway and Colchester junction, on which he was approaching without care and speed. He subsequently crashed in a silver 83 at such strength that the impact of the front passenger door of the Abbey and the passenger 39 of Linda Franklin fell from the vehicle into the path of another vehicle. Instead of stopping at the scene of Hackwell Way, Colchester drove off. Police were later contacted and reports of damaged silver Audi abandoned the day close. The driver had left the vehicle. Subsequent check by police found at the owner was Mr. Jankovic. Disgusting. Christopher Spooner, 42, from Padstock Square, Basden, Essex, created a group online chat program which connected paedophiles across the globe. This program would be used for paedophiles to share thousands of indecent images of children with other paedophiles. Investigating officers also found in online chat threads that Spooner had encouraged a man to sexually abuse a child and send videos and images of the observed sex offender. The police received information he was accessing indecent images of children in breach of a sexual harm prevention. A search warrant was carried out at his home, and police officers subsequently seized mobile phones and cards. Absolutely shocking, absorbing information. I do not know why these people even exist. I have no room in my heart or in my head to even air the stupidity of these humans. Why are they even born? Why are they people like this? Don't understand why these such predators are born in this world. Really don't. On October 2nd, they've got no purpose in our life. The notorious Rico drug line between April and October 2020. The investigation led them to John Marshall, who on October 2nd was in an Audi Q2 on Mardyke Road in Harlow, Essex. Officers carried out a stop and search on those in the car. On Marshall, person was 8 packs of cocaine and £1,000 in cash. During a search in custody, officers 50 pairs of trainers, receipts totaling £1,000 of designer items, £3,000 in cash and drugs. At a court in October and November, Marshall 20 in the making. 17th of February 2020 is jailed for 4 years, Chelmsford Crown Court. All cash found by the police was seized, will be subject to for future hearing. Sergeant James Peggett said, when you get involved in drug dealing, a lifestyle choice to earn money, there is a lot at stake. Your life as well. Time. But one thing I want to suggest, if you're in a relationship that's bringing you down, you need to better your foundations. The foundations start at home. If you're smothered by human excrement, you need to, make that human excrement relationship with your friend, your loved one, your wife perhaps. You need to make it annihilate. It's not working, it's not for you. You need to better yourself. Alcoholism and narcotics is a lot of this stupidity. And I don't know how to answer because I don't know. I've never been in that disgusting situation. Okay, it's horrific, absolute shocking news. Anyway, legend, thank you for all my loyal listeners. Really appreciate your time coming in, giving me some acknowledgement, encouragement as well. Absolute encouragement, absolute phenomenal. Thank you for being observant, staying preserved, keeping me occupied. Hour and 15 is proclamation news and with the prodigious deployment Professor PNG. God bless, take care, speak soon, one love.